The Galactic Empire had ruled the stars for millennia, subjugating countless civilizations under its oppressive rule. Each year, the Empire sent tribute demands to its subject worlds, demanding resources, wealth, and even military conscripts. Earth, though a relatively new member of this galactic order, had grown tired of the constant tribute demands. In a conference room deep within Earth's military command center, General Marcus Steele stood before a large holographic display. His weathered face bore the marks of countless battles, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. "The Empire has gone too far this time," he declared, pointing to the hologram of the latest Imperial demand. "They want 50% of our planet's energy resources, and they've even requested soldiers to fight in their wars." The room was silent for a moment, filled with tension as Earth's leaders processed the severity of the situation. Among them sat President Elena Graves, her brow furrowed in thought. She glanced at Steele, then at the other officials. "We've given enough," she said, her voice firm. "Earth cannot keep sacrificing its future for the Empire's greed." General Steele stepped forward. "Madam President, we have a plan. It's time we send a message. The Empire thinks they can bully us because we're smaller, but they've underestimated our resolve." The President nodded. "What do you propose?" Steele leaned over the holographic map, zooming in on a distant star system. "We strike back. Hard. We have 500,000 Gladiator missiles ready to deploy. If we hit their tribute fleet before they reach Earth, we'll cripple their supply lines and show them we're not to be trifled with." A murmur of agreement spread through the room, but one voice of caution arose. Dr. Celia Monroe, Earth's leading strategist. "If we retaliate, we'll start a war we might not win. The Empire's forces are vast." Steele shook his head. "We've been preparing for this moment for years. The Gladiator missiles aren't just weapons. They're symbols of our defiance. We're fighting for our survival, and if the Empire wants war, we'll give them one." The President stood, her decision made. "Launch the missiles. Let the Empire know Earth will no longer bow." As the order was given, Earth's space forces prepared for the largest military strike in human history. In the cold vacuum of space, hundreds of missile silos opened, each one housing a Gladiator missile capable of obliterating entire fleets. With a synchronized roar, 500,000 missiles launched from Earth's surface, their fiery trails lighting up the night sky. As they sped toward the Empire's tribute fleet, there was no turning back. The tribute demand had backfired, and Earth was ready to fight. In the heart of the Galactic Empire, Grand Admiral Voreth received the news of Earth's missile strike. His pale, angular face twisted in anger as he stared at the holographic projection of the destroyed tribute fleet. The human retaliation had taken the Empire by surprise, and Voreth was not used to surprises. 500,000 missiles, he muttered, pacing the command bridge of his dreadnought. How did these primitive humans manage such a massive assault? His second in command, Captain Drell, stood at attention. "The humans have been more resourceful than we anticipated, Admiral. They've managed to develop advanced weapons in secret." Voreth slammed his fist on the control panel. "Resourceful or not, they will pay for this. Ready the fleet. We will make an example of Earth." As Voreth's orders spread across the Empire, entire fleets of warships were mobilized. The Empire's vast military machine, which had crushed rebellions on hundreds of worlds, now turned its gaze toward the blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Steele and his team monitored the Empire's movements closely. The missile strike had been successful, but it was clear that the retaliation was coming. In a hidden underground bunker, Steele addressed his most trusted advisors. "They're coming for us," he said, pulling up a map of the approaching Imperial fleets. "Our sensors show dozens of warships heading our way, but we've anticipated this. Earth is more than ready." Dr. Monroe stepped forward, her calm demeanor hiding the tension she felt. "Our defense grid is operational, and the orbital cannons are online. The key will be to disrupt their fleet's formation. If we can take out their command ships, we'll create chaos." Steele nodded. "And chaos is what we need. The Empire thrives on order and control. will use their rigidity against them. As Earth's forces braced for the Empire's arrival, a sense of unity spread across the planet. Humanity had faced threats before, but nothing like this. Now they stood on the brink of war with a power that had subjugated entire star systems. And yet, despite the odds, the people of Earth were ready. Factories worked day and night, producing weapons, ships, and defenses. Civilians volunteered to join the military, determined to defend their home. The Earth Defense Fleet, though smaller than the Empire's armada, was composed of elite pilots and soldiers who had trained for this moment. In space, the Gladiator missiles had bought Earth precious time. As the first wave of Imperial ships entered the solar system, they were met with an array of surprises. Mines, cloaked drones, and long-range artillery from hidden outposts slowed their advance, forcing them into a cautious approach. The Empire had come for tribute, but now it found itself locked in a war with a species that refused to surrender. As the last fragments of debris from the Andromedan outpost drifted into space, Captain Brian and his team returned to the reconnaissance ship. Though their recent victory had dealt a critical blow to the Andromedans, the weight of their mission pressed harder on their shoulders. The Nexus, the key to unimaginable power, was still at large. It was a race against time, and every moment wasted brought the Galactic Council closer to claiming the ancient artifact. Gathering intel, Brian stood before the holographic display, deep in thought. His team was spread around the table, each lost in their own mental preparations for the next step of the mission. Ava broke the silence, her voice filled with urgency. "We know the Council is assembling a fleet, Brian. But the question is, how long do we have until they find the Nexus?" Brian's eyes narrowed. "Not long enough. If they get it, there won't be anything left to fight for. But we've got one advantage. They don't know that we're tracking their every move." Liam, the tactical expert, leaned forward. "We've hit them hard, but if we're going to win, we need more than just a strike-and-run approach. We need allies." A murmur went through the group. The thought of reaching out to potential allies was risky, especially with trust being a rare commodity in the galaxy. But Liam's point was valid. The humans were powerful, but their forces were small compared to the vast fleets the Council controlled. A dangerous proposition. "We might have a chance," Brian said, pulling up a star chart on the display. "There's one faction that hates the Council as much as we do, maybe more. The Xalinar. They've been in exile for centuries, but they've been rebuilding. If we can convince them to help us, we stand a chance." The Xalinar, Ava's brow furrowed. "They're unpredictable. They're also ruthless." Brian nodded. "Exactly, but they're also the best shot we have." The decision was made. The team set a course for the Xalinar's home planet, a desolate world on the edge of the known galaxy. Their ship slipped through the vastness of space, silent and determined. A meeting of foes. The Xalinar's planet loomed ahead, its surface jagged and barren. The once great civilization had been reduced to ruins, but beneath the surface lay their hidden strength. As the human ship descended into the atmosphere, a sense of unease filled the crew. The Xalinar were notorious for their treachery and cunning. As the landing ramp lowered, Brian and his team walked out into the harsh winds of the planet's surface. They were greeted by a small delegation of Xalinar warriors, their tall, sleek forms casting long shadows in the dim light. At the front stood their leader, General Jura, a cold, calculating figure known for her ruthlessness in battle. "You must be desperate to come here, human," Jura said, her voice like ice. "Why should we listen to your pleas?" Brian held his ground, meeting her gaze without flinching. "We're not here to beg. We're here because the Council is after something that will make them unstoppable, the Nexus. If they get it, that Xalinar will be the next in line for annihilation." Jura narrowed her eyes, considering his words. "And you think we will help you, just like that? What makes you think we care about your little rebellion?" Brian's face hardened. "Because once the Council finishes with us, they'll come for you. This is your fight as much as it is ours." There was a long pause. The Xalinar warriors watched silently, their expressions unreadable. Then slowly, a smile crept across Jura's face. "You've got nerve, Captain." "I like that. Perhaps you're right, but we don't fight for free. What do you offer in return?" "A gamble on trust." Brian knew this moment was crucial. The Salinar could be powerful allies, but they were just as likely to turn on the humans if it suited their goals. "Your freedom," he replied. "We know the Council has been tightening its grip on the outer worlds. Help us defeat them, and we'll ensure that your people can rebuild, free from their control." Jura's smile widened. "Interesting. But make no mistake, Captain. If you betray us, we'll bury you in the ruins of your own world." Brian extended his hand. "Deal." Jura clasped it firmly, sealing the alliance. With the Salinar by their side, the humans had taken a bold step forward, but the path ahead was fraught with danger. The battle for the Nexus had only just begun. The newly forged alliance between the humans and the Salinar marked a turning point in their fight against the Galactic Council. But the uneasy partnership left both sides wary. Trust was fragile, and any misstep could shatter the alliance before the real battle had even begun. Time was of the essence as the Council's forces closed in on the Nexus's location. The plan unfolds. Back aboard their ship, Brian and his team huddled together with the Salinar leaders in the strategy room. The tension was palpable, as both sides sized each other up, knowing full well that any wrong move could lead to betrayal. General Jura stood at the head of the table, her sharp eyes scanning the holographic map of the Nexus's last known location. "Our scouts have reported increased Council activity in the Targan system. If they're searching for the Nexus, that's where they'll make their move." Liam nodded, his tactical mind already at work. The Council's fleet is powerful, but it's stretched thin across multiple systems. If we strike at the Targan system before they fully mobilize, we might catch them off guard. Brian glanced at his team. "We'll need a two-pronged approach. One force to engage the Council head-on and another to infiltrate the surface, where the Nexus is likely hidden. The Salinar will provide air support, while we handle the ground assault." Jura's lips curled into a smile. "You humans certainly like to take risks. I respect that." Building the fleet. The Alliance gave humanity access to the Salinar's advanced technology. Their ships were fast, sleek, and deadly, equipped with weapons that could tear through even the Council's formidable defenses. For days, the humans and Salinar worked together, integrating their forces into a single cohesive unit. Ava, the team's engineer, marveled at the Salinar's technology as she worked alongside their technicians. "This is light years ahead of anything we've seen. If we can combine our missile systems with their plasma shielding, we might stand a chance." In the hangar, human and Salinar pilots trained together, learning each other's combat techniques and communication systems. Despite the differences in culture and language, a shared purpose began to unite them. A shared resolve. As the day of the battle drew closer, Brian stood on the bridge of the ship, looking out at the stars. The weight of the mission pressed heavily on him. The Nexus wasn't just an artifact. It was a symbol of the future. Whoever controlled it would shape the destiny of the galaxy. Ava approached, her face filled with quiet determination. "We've come a long way, Brian. No matter what happens, we've given them a fight." Brian nodded. "But it's not enough to just fight. We have to win." With their forces ready, the humans and Salinar prepared to make their final stand. The Targan system awaited, and with it, the fate of the galaxy. The Targan system, once a quiet region of space, now teemed with the warships of the Galactic Council. Massive dreadnoughts patrolled the skies, and below, their ground forces scoured the planets for the Nexus, unaware of the storm about to descend upon them. In the void, a fleet formed in silence. The combined forces of the human rebellion and the Salinar hovered on the system's edge, cloaked by advanced Salinar stealth technology. The moment was tense, the calm before the inevitable storm. The calm before the battle. On the command deck, Captain Brian studied the battlefield on a holographic display. His team surrounded him, each member focused on their tasks. Beside him, General Jura, always calculating, reviewed the tactics they had discussed for days. Ava, the ship's engineer, stood nearby, her fingers dancing across a console as she performed a final systems check. Shields and weapons are online. Selnar plasma cannons integrated with our systems. Everything's good to go. Liam, always calm under pressure, monitored enemy movements. His voice cut through the silence. Council ships are spread thin. We have a clear path if we hit them fast enough. They'll only have time to react after we've already punched through their lines. Brian nodded. Good, but don't get cocky. They won't go down without a fight. General Jura smirked, and we wouldn't want it any other way. The first strike. As the combined fleet approached the Targan system, the quiet was shattered by the hum of engines and the soft clicking of weapon systems powering up. The plan was simple, but risky. Overwhelm the Council's forces in space while the infiltration team made their way to the planet's surface. If they could find the Nexus before the Council did, they might be able to turn the tide of the war. Commence the assault, Brian commanded, his voice steady. With a sudden burst of speed, the Selnar's ships uncloaked and surged forward. Human vessels followed closely behind, launching volleys of missiles and energy blasts at the unsuspecting Council fleet. The first few ships erupted in flames, torn apart by the precision of the Selnar's weaponry. Council ships scrambled to respond, but the rebels had already gained the upper hand. In the chaos of battle, their forces carved a path through the Council fleet, pressing toward the planet below. Infiltration on the surface. Meanwhile, the ground team, led by Brian, prepared for the most critical phase of the mission. Aboard a small, stealth-equipped shuttle, they descended toward the surface of Targan V, where the Nexus was believed to be hidden. The Council had already begun excavation operations, but they were still searching. It was now a race against time. As the shuttle touched down in a canyon not far from the Council's dig site, Brian and his team disembarked quickly. They moved through the rocky terrain, the ruins of an ancient civilization looming around them. The air was thin, and the planet's surface was harsh, but their training pushed them forward. We're close, Ava said, checking her scanner. Energy signatures are spiking below the surface. The Nexus is down there. The team pressed on, making their way into an ancient underground structure. The halls were dark and foreboding, the remnants of a long-lost civilization, but there was no time to marvel at the ruins. The Council's forces were already here, and the sound of distant blaster fire echoed through the corridors. A deadly encounter. As they entered a large chamber, they found themselves face to face with a squad of Council soldiers. A firefight broke out almost instantly. Blaster bolts flew across the room, lighting up the ancient stone walls. Liam ducked behind a fallen column, returning fire with his rifle. They're not going to make this easy, are they? No, Brian muttered, firing off a shot that took down a soldier. But we didn't expect easy. Ava worked quickly, using her scanner to locate the Nexus's exact position. It's right beneath us. We need to get past them if we're going to reach it. The team pushed forward, using their training and the element of surprise to their advantage. With precision and teamwork, they took down the remaining soldiers. As the last one fell, a tense silence filled the chamber. Brian approached the center of the room, where a circular stone platform stood. Ancient symbols glowed faintly on its surface. This is it, he said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The Nexus. Ava knelt beside the platform, her eyes scanning the symbols. It's a power source unlike anything I've ever seen. If the Council gets their hands on this, it's over. Brian nodded. Then we can't let that happen. The Nexus unleashed. Just as Ava began working to unlock the platform's mechanism, a deep rumble shook the chamber. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling, and the walls began to tremble. Something's coming, Liam warned, his hand instinctively tightening around his weapon. Suddenly, the far wall of the chamber exploded inward, and a massive figure stepped through the smoke. It was one of the Council's elite enforcers, clad in heavy armor and wielding a massive energy weapon. Behind him, more soldiers poured in, determined to seize the Nexus at any cost. Brian cursed under his breath. We've got company. The enforcer raised his weapon, and the room erupted into chaos once again. Blasts of energy shot across the chamber as the two sides clashed. Brian and his team fought valiantly, but the Enforcer was unlike anything they had faced before. His armor shrugged off their blaster fire, and his strength was overwhelming. Ava worked frantically, her fingers flying over the Nexus's control panel. "I just need a few more seconds." But time was running out. The Enforcer advanced, his weapon aimed directly at Brian. The captain gritted his teeth, firing shot after shot, but it was no use. Then, just as the Enforcer prepared to strike, the Nexus began to glow. A pulse of energy erupted from the platform, sending shockwaves through the room. The Enforcer stumbled, his weapon faltering, and in that brief moment of distraction, Brian took his chance. With a single, well-aimed shot, he hit the weak spot in the Enforcer's armor, sending the massive figure crashing to the ground. The room fell silent once more as the remaining Council soldiers retreated, unwilling to face the wrath of the Nexus. Ava stood up, her face pale but determined. "It's done. The Nexus is activated." Brian approached the platform, the power of the Nexus radiating through the chamber. "What now?" Ava's voice was quiet, but her words carried the weight of the universe. "Now we decide the future of the galaxy." As the battle outside raged on, Brian knew that everything hinged on the next decision. The Nexus was in their hands, but at what cost? The power to shape the galaxy's destiny was theirs, but with great power came great responsibility. The final battle was far from over. With the Nexus activated, a surge of energy filled the chamber, casting an ethereal glow across the ancient ruins. Brian, Ava, Liam, and the rest of the team stood in awe of the vast power radiating from the device. The atmosphere was thick with tension as they realized the implications of what they had just unleashed. The Nexus unleashed. The platform hummed with an otherworldly energy, its ancient symbols now glowing brightly, illuminating the faces of the team. Ava stepped back, her eyes fixed on the Nexus as it pulsed rhythmically, its power growing with each passing second. "We've done it," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the Nexus. "But this is beyond anything we imagined." Brian stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he gazed into the swirling vortex of energy. "Can we control it?" Ava shook her head, uncertainty written across her face. "Control? Maybe. But understand it. This is technology far beyond our comprehension. We could destroy the Council with this, but we could destroy ourselves just as easily." Liam, ever the realist, spoke up. "So, what do we do now? We came here to stop the Council from getting their hands on this thing. But if we leave it here, they'll just come back. And if we take it with us, it's a weapon we'll have to use." Brian remained silent for a moment, the weight of the decision settling heavily on his shoulders. The fate of the galaxy rested on what they chose to do next. The Nexus was a power unlike anything they had ever encountered, a force capable of reshaping entire star systems or reducing them to ashes. Council reinforcements arrive. Outside the ruins, the battle still raged. Despite the initial success of the Rebel and Selnar fleet, the Council was far from defeated. Reinforcements had arrived, and the Council's forces were now pushing back against the Rebel fleet. Dreadnoughts and cruisers clashed in the void, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. Inside the chamber, the rumble of explosions from the ongoing battle echoed faintly through the walls. Time was running out. "We need to make a call," Liam urged, gripping his weapon tightly. "We can't hold off the Council forever. If they break through, they'll swarm this place, and all of this will have been for nothing." General Jura's voice crackled through their comms. "Captain, we're holding the line, but we can't keep this up indefinitely. The Council's fleet is growing. If you've got the Nexus, now's the time to use it." Brian looked to Ava, his mind racing. Is there any way to use the Nexus against the Council fleet? A controlled burst, something that could disable their ships without destroying everything. Ava hesitated, her fingers hovering over the Nexus's controls. "It's possible, but it's risky. The energy output from the Nexus is unpredictable. If I miscalculate, we could wipe out everything in this system, including ourselves." Brian exhaled slowly, weighing their options. They had come too far to fail now. but the power of the Nexus was overwhelming, and its potential for destruction terrified him. A sudden betrayal. As they deliberated, a voice interrupted them. "You're not seriously considering using the Nexus, are you?" The team turned to see a figure stepping out of the shadows. It was Commander Voss, a high-ranking officer from the rebellion who had been working with them from the start. His eyes gleamed with an intensity that immediately put Brian on edge. "Voss," Brian said cautiously, "what are you doing here? You're supposed to be with the fleet." "I came for the Nexus," Voss replied coldly, his hand resting on the hilt of his blaster. "The rebellion needs it. You don't understand what's at stake here. If we don't seize this power, the Council will crush us. You think we can win this war without making sacrifices? You're wrong." Liam's hand instinctively moved to his weapon. "What are you saying, Voss?" Voss stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the Nexus. "I'm saying that I won't let you throw away our only chance of victory. The Nexus isn't something to fear. It's a tool, a weapon we can use to end this war once and for all." Brian's jaw clenched. "You're talking about playing God with a power we don't fully understand. You'd risk the lives of billions." Voss shrugged. "The Council doesn't care about those lives, and if we don't act now, they'll enslave the entire galaxy. We have no choice." Before anyone could react, Voss drew his blaster and aimed it at Ava, who was still standing near the Nexus. "Step aside, Ava. I won't ask again." A tense silence filled the chamber as everyone froze, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Ava's eyes darted to Brian, searching for guidance. The team was at a crossroads, betrayed by one of their own, caught between using the Nexus for destruction or walking away from it altogether. The final stand. Brian's hand hovered over his blaster, but he knew that a firefight would put everyone at risk, especially with the Nexus so unstable. He spoke slowly, trying to de-escalate the situation. "Voss, we all want to defeat the Council, but this isn't the way. The Nexus could tear the galaxy apart." Voss' grip on the blaster tightened. "You're weak, Brian. That's why you'll never win this war. But I will." Suddenly, a flash of movement caught Voss off guard. Liam, quick on his feet, lunged forward, knocking the blaster from Voss' hand. The weapon skittered across the floor as the two men grappled. Brian and Ava rushed to help, but Voss was strong and determined, fueled by desperation. In the struggle, Voss managed to break free, shoving Liam aside. But before he could grab his weapon, a shot rang out. Voss staggered, clutching his side, his eyes wide with shock. Brian stood a few feet away, his blaster still smoking. Voss looked down at the wound, then back up at Brian. You don't understand." With a final gasp, Voss collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Silence filled the chamber once again, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Brian holstered his weapon, his face grim. He hadn't wanted this, but Voss had left him no choice. Ava swallowed hard, her voice shaky. "What now, Brian? What do we do with the Nexus?" Brian stared at the pulsating device, the weight of the decision pressing down on him more than ever. The rebellion's future, the fate of the galaxy, all of it hung in the balance. After a long pause, he finally spoke, his voice resolute. "We destroy it." Liam blinked in surprise. "Are you sure? After everything?" Brian nodded, his eyes fixed on the Nexus. "No one should have this kind of power. Not the Council, not us. It's too dangerous. We came here to stop them, and that's what we're going to do." Ava glanced at the Nexus's controls, her hands trembling slightly. "I can rig it to overload, but once I start the process, there's no going back." Brian placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice firm. "Do it." As Ava began working, Liam took up position by the door, keeping watch in case more Council soldiers arrived. Outside, the sounds of battle grew closer, but inside the chamber, a quiet resolve settled over the team. They had made their choice. Ava's hands flew across the console, entering commands as the Nexus's energy levels spiked. The device began to glow brighter, the ancient symbols flaring to life. "Let's get out of here," Brian said, turning to his team. They sprinted out of the chamber, the walls shaking as the Nexus's energy reached critical levels. The ground trembled beneath their feet as they made their way through the ruins and back to the shuttle. As they lifted off, the Nexus chamber collapsed in on itself, a blinding explosion of light erupting from the planet's surface. The shockwave rippled through space, taking out the Council's forces in orbit, but sparing the rebel fleet. The Nexus was gone. The rebellion had won this battle, but the war was far from over. As the shuttle soared into the stars, Brian sat back, his mind heavy with the cost of their victory. The future of the galaxy was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they had chosen a path where power was not the answer. And for now, that was enough. The shuttle pierced through the darkness of space, leaving the chaotic battle behind. As they ascended, the light from the explosion illuminated the cockpit, casting fleeting shadows across the faces of Brian, Ava, and Liam. Silence enveloped them, heavy with the weight of their decision. Reflections on victory. Brian leaned back in his seat, staring out at the stars as they blurred past. The destruction of the Nexus was a bittersweet victory. They had eliminated a dangerous weapon, but the Council was still out there, and the war was far from over. Ava sat beside him, her expression contemplative. "Do you think we made the right choice?" she asked quietly, her eyes still fixed on the stars. The Council was relentless. The Nexus could have turned the tide in our favor. Brian sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but power like that, it corrupts. We saw what it did to Voss. If we used it, what would we have become? We couldn't risk that." Liam, still vigilant at the controls, glanced back at them. "It's hard to say, but the Council will come after us now more than ever. We just wiped out a significant portion of their fleet. They won't take that lightly." Ava's voice turned urgent. "We need to rally our forces, spread the word. The Council is weakened, but they'll be desperate. We can use this moment to inspire more systems to join the rebellion." Brian nodded, his resolve strengthening. "We have to show them that we can fight back. That hope isn't lost. Let's get to the rebel fleet and strategize our next move." Reunion with allies. As they approached the rebel fleet's coordinates, Brian felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The battle had been chaotic, and he was eager to regroup with their allies, to see who had survived and how they could use this opportunity to strengthen their cause. The shuttle docked with the flagship, a massive cruiser that had been the heart of their operations. As they stepped off, they were met with a flurry of activity. Medics rushed past, carrying wounded soldiers, and technicians worked diligently to assess the damage. "Captain," General Jura spotted them and hurried over, relief washing over his face. "I'm glad you made it back. We feared the worst after the explosion." Brian exchanged a quick glance with Ava and Liam before responding. "We destroyed the Nexus, but the Council is still out there. We need to prepare for their retaliation." Jura nodded, his expression grim. "We've sustained heavy losses, but morale is high. We've rallied a few systems that were on the fence. They're ready to join the fight. We just need a solid plan." "Let's meet in the briefing room," Brian suggested, leading the way through the ship. As they walked, he felt the weight of their previous choices settling on his shoulders. Every decision carried consequences, and they had to ensure that they didn't repeat the mistakes of the past. A call to arms. In the briefing room, Brian, Ava, Liam, and General Jura gathered around a holographic display, which projected a map of the star systems surrounding their location. A few other key officers joined them, each looking weary but resolute. "We have an opportunity here," Brian began, his voice steady. "The Council has suffered a significant loss, and if we act quickly, we can capitalize on that. We need to focus on gathering more support from the systems that are still neutral." Jura pointed to the map, highlighting key systems. "These systems are ripe for recruitment. They've been watching us and the Council, waiting for a sign. We can send diplomats to sway their leaders, but we also need to show them we're strong enough to protect them." Ava chimed in, "And we need to be ready for a counterattack. The Council will retaliate. We need to fortify our defenses and gather intel on their movements. If we can predict their actions, we can stay one step ahead." Liam leaned forward, his expression serious. We also need to consider our communication strategy. We should broadcast our message of hope and resilience to the galaxy. Let everyone know that we've struck a blow against the Council. Brian nodded. We'll use our fleet's transmission capabilities to send a message far and wide. We can show that we're not just surviving, we're thriving, but we can't afford to be complacent. An unexpected visitor. As they finalized their plans, the room's atmosphere shifted. The door slid open, and a familiar figure stepped in, Mara, the former council officer who had defected to join the rebellion. Her presence brought a mix of surprise and intrigue. Apologies for the interruption, she said, a hint of urgency in her tone. But I have information that could change everything. Ryan raised an eyebrow, motioning for her to continue. What do you have, Mara? Mara stepped closer to the holographic display. I've been gathering intel on the Council's movements since I joined you. They're planning a coordinated strike on our main base. I overheard them discussing their intentions before I left. The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Brian's heart raced. When is the attack scheduled? Within the next few days, she replied. They're mobilizing their remaining forces and trying to catch you off guard. We need to act quickly. Then we prepare for a defensive stance, Brian said decisively. We'll need to reinforce our base and ensure our allies know we're under threat. We can't let them take us by surprise. Mara nodded. And I can help. I know the Council's strategies and tactics. I can advise you on how they think. Welcome aboard, Brian said, extending a hand. We can use all the help we can get. A renewed purpose. As they worked late into the night, strategizing and preparing for the inevitable confrontation, Brian felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each plan laid out, each voice raised in determination, reminded him that they were not alone in this fight. Days turned into nights as they reinforced their defenses, rallied allies, and spread their message throughout the galaxy. The people needed hope, and they would give it to them. As the day of the Council's anticipated strike approached, Brian stood on the bridge of the flagship, gazing out at the stars. He could feel the tension in the air, the calm before the storm. But this time they were ready. We'll show the galaxy what we stand for, he vowed quietly to himself. No more fear, no more hiding. Together we'll fight for our future. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon of their base, the team stood united, prepared to face whatever came next. The war was far from over, but this time they had something the Council did not: hope.